me, that was a performance that threw up more questions than answers. On the face of it, 4-1 win, away in the Premier League, by the way. Away in the Premier League. We're going to take in just a second. So 4-1 a win away in the Premier League. We go on to the next game, European game. We've got Liverpool, of course, coming up soon as well in the league. So, on the face of it, our first team win again, and we just carry on with the same team against Liverpool, right? With the same players just doing what they did. I'm not so sure. And I'll speak about that in just a second. But let me just make one point here. Away wins, traditionally, in all of football, forget about West Ham, are really, really hard to come by. That's the whole point of home advantage, isn't it? If you can win loads of away games, then you're going to be doing rather well. And this has been a massive feature of things under David Moyes. Was it part of it to do with COVID? I think there was certainly the suspicion that was the case. And certainly there were some pundits who suggested that West Ham's home form was because the fans weren't there. I think the myths on both have been busted, actually. I think we're good at home with the fans there. And I think we're good away from home. Usually the most... the simplest explanation is usually the one that's the truth, and the simple explanation is that we're actually a really good team. Regardless of whether we're playing swashbucklingly well or sort of grinding out a result and, I guess, taking advantage of weak opposition, which is what we did against Villa, it doesn't really matter. We're just a good team who can get the job done. And winning away from home is a massive feature of that. It really is. I don't think Villa will get relegated this season. I really don't. But I do think they'll probably get to a point where they replace their manager. Someone else will come in and they'll get a tune out of players who are some really, really good players. There's no doubt about that. My point being, I think Aston Villa will win plenty of games this season. I really do. However, in us beating them in that victory, I think because it wasn't a resounding victory in terms of performance, certainly in terms of scoreline, but not in terms of performance, I think it leaves a few questions there. And the first one that I think has to be asked is that of the goalkeeper. So, would necessarily Fabianski start as our first choice goalkeeper against Liverpool? I'm not so sure. I've seen a number of mistakes from him now. Now, all I can say is these mistakes, I heard somebody say he's making errors, but they don't appear to be costly. They do. Just not in this game. They weren't costly. I feel, obviously, the mistake against Brentford was costly, and obviously against Manchester United was where he spilled the ball out in front of Ronaldo. There's one person don't give the ball to 3 metres away from goal was Cristiano Ronaldo. However, I think what we're seeing is, as well, quite a few fumbles, and I think in this game it didn't cost us as well. I think he could have done better with the goal. He sort of half slid across the goal and stuck his leg out. And then there was the weird exchange with a back pass from Ogbonna, which he then kicked out for a corner. On their own isolated incidents, probably not so bad. But bearing in mind he's had a couple where he's flapped and not caught the ball particularly well. And I don't particularly want to dig him out after a victory, but I just feel after that there's such a good performance that you've had from Areola in League Cup against Manchester City. For that then to happen with Fabianski, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a slight change in the guard there. So I feel that's an interesting sort of dynamic around the team. The other one's Ben Johnson, and I enjoyed his goal, I enjoyed his performance, and the West Ham fan in me certainly enjoyed the fact that he's come up through the ranks. But there was a little part where Coufal and I believe it was Vlasic were warming up, and Not when they came on, but there was a warm-up bit, and I saw Coufal's face. For okay, well he's not going to be that pleased with what's going on at the moment. You can understand that he's a winner, and he's just signed a new deal. But there's an interesting dynamic there because our best team has now slightly changed. So how's Coufal going to deal with being the second in charge? Well, I covered that a little bit in another video, but what it does do, and here's how it changes the dynamic again, is Fredericks. Fredericks, I believe his contract runs out this season. There's been talk about selling him. I'm not sure we'll necessarily be able to sell him, but what you may well find is Fredericks being sort of finished at West Ham. Now, I think he'll play through this season, and I think it's a little bit of a shame for him, because just at the point that Coufal came in, Fredericks was playing well, and he's never been able to really cement a place in the team. On a couple of occasions he has played well, he's then got injuries. So I think at the very point he was improving, the landscape at West Ham has got a little bit worse for him and made it harder for him to thrive within the sort of parameters of the squad. So I think that, again, that's another thing that probably changes for him. And then there was something that really struck me about this game as well, and it was, I didn't feel we were retaining the ball particularly well. I don't think David Moyes felt we were retaining the ball particularly well, and that's why he brought on Lanzini. I won't talk about Lanzini, that's why I wanted to do a separate video, and I spoke about him in yesterday's video, last night's video. But Benrahma, who he chose to take off, was playing wide. And here's the thing, and I sort of think the win and the nature of the scoreline, it means I don't think people necessarily focused on this, but something really interesting happened. See, we bought a wide player. We bought a player that plays in that position for Vlasic for over £30 million. So you would think at that point where, for whatever reason, David Moyes has determined Benrahma's not doing it for me in this game. Do I think there's a bigger picture to that? No, not really. Do I think Lanzini, who did come on, now starts against Liverpool? Not necessarily. No, I don't. However, it was quite clear in this game, because Fornals was playing central, that David Moyes had thought, okay, it's not working for me in that wide area. What did he do at that point? Well, he didn't bring Vlasic on. And I think that was quite telling. Because that was exactly the point when you thought he probably would have done. By the way, no criticism of David Moyes. What he did is he looked into his magic hat of substitutes, and the rabbit he pulled out was Manuel Lanzini. And it was the right one. Because Lanzini was magnificent for all the reasons that I said in yesterday's video. But the fact that he didn't use Vlasic, I find that to be very, very telling. Because it didn't even appear to me necessarily that when Lanzini came on, that it was a case of, oh, I'll come on and I'll go central. Yes, Lanzini was central for the goal, but I'll go central, and then what will happen is Fornals will go and hug the left touchline. I was waiting for that to happen. Fornals was still popping up centrally loads and loads and loads. In essence, there was no reason, if the only issue with that team was Saïd Benrahma, that Vlasic didn't get substituted. I just found it quite interesting. And then I look at it, and then I sort of look at the team as well. And so we're playing well, we're winning. Can we do even better? Well, I think with Johnson being in there, we're doing a little bit better. I think quite possibly by putting Areola in there, we're doing a little bit better. Vlasic is not about the first team, but it's just an observation I thought interested me. So it takes me to my last point on this game, and that is Ogbonna has looked a little bit shaky. I thought there was a dodgy back pass, and I thought possibly it's hard to... It's as Gio said, I think I need to go back and look at the goal again, but certainly nobody was marking Ollie Watkins. And like I said earlier, it was a bad time, and Gio mentioned it as well, it's a bad time for Fabianski not to make some individual errors, because based on the backdrop of Areola playing so well, I think you've got to apply the same rule when you assess Ogbonna, because actually it's a really bad time for him to be doing a couple of shaky things when Diop is playing so well. And there's one thing I really like about David Moyes. Well, there's many things I like about David Moyes, but there's one thing in particular, which is, realistically, Ben Johnson shouldn't have that starting spot, okay? It's easy. My point is, it's easier for David Moyes to play Coufal. It's easier to drop Ben Johnson. I mean, he can do so without any pressure at all. Because what he can say is, oh, well, look, Ben Johnson's played 3 or 4 games in a row, Coufal's back. Ben Johnson, realistically, will be relatively happy. He's a member of the first team squad. Moyes can say, I gave a lad a chance. And he can do all that and not upset Coufal by putting Coufal back in the team. The most awkward thing to do is leave Coufal out, because that makes Coufal will get more upset. It's the more difficult decision. So, but what Moyes is doing, he's not going with the decision because it's easier. He's going with who he feels is best in right back, and at the moment he feels that's Ben Johnson, and he's right, by the way. So I look at that as a barometer, as a way to measure what's going on with Fabianski and Areola, and I think that he probably would choose the right thing to do. Again, like he has at right back. However, I do think there's something which is the obligation to buy. And I think somebody made the point the obligation to buy is based on appearances. I don't just think it's any appearances, I think it's league appearances. So if for whatever reason Moyes is unsure about the budget and how much he'd have to fork out to bring in Areola, it might explain why Fabianski might keep his place. However, I do think he'll apply, let's call it the Johnson rule, which is the best player plays, regardless of seniority. That's the point, isn't it? Coufal's more senior than Johnson. Johnson's easier to drop without any repercussions. I think looking at Ogbonna as well, and Ogbonna's a hell of a player. I'm not saying Ogbonna's finished it before anyone says anything. He's finished at West Ham or anything like that. Far from it, okay? But it may well be that David Moyes looks at it and thinks, well, actually at the moment, particularly bearing in mind how he's playing, maybe Diop is the better option. Maybe the composition of our first team is fluid. Maybe it changes a little bit. And actually when you look at it, don't rule out that what I certainly, when we do our build-up show or we do our previews, myself and Gio have thought the first team as very much Fabianski, Coufal, Zuma, Ogbonna, Cresswell. You know, that first team. Do not rule out that actually a large chunk of that changes and actually turns out to be Areola, Johnson, Zuma, Diop and Cresswell. I really do. I think there's something in there as well. And it's a case of we're doing great at the moment. How can we get a little bit better? Do not be surprised if David Moyes throws a curveball.